Great. Well, welcome to our presentation on governance best practices for your Appian COE. My name is Karl Schumann. I'm a technical delivery manager for Appian PS. I'm joined here on stage with Mike Cichy, master architect. He hates it when I call him that, but I use that word intentionally because he's literally authored about 90% of the Appian playbook that you can find on Community. So I encourage you as a follow-up to this presentation to go check that out. And there's a lot more out there than we're going to be able to cover.
All right.
So, without further ado, today we're going to talk about the who, the what, and the how of Appian COE. And we're going to focus specifically on practical tips, things to think about that maybe you're not currently doing, that you can implement immediately to make your COE more effective. Thinking about the core activities of the governance activities of the COE, that can be broken up into three basic parts. There's enablement, finding the right staff for your COE, identifying who they are, what the skills are, what the pipeline is for bringing them in. But not just that, also how to give them the best practical skills and experience so that they can be hands-on doers within your COE and within your Appian practice. We're going to talk about vision, so laying the groundwork for your Appian platform in such a way that it can scale and that it can grow effectively. And finally, execution, giving your practitioners the skills, the tools they need to implement, and also laying the rails for making sure that they build applications that are scalable. So I'm going to hand things over to Mike to talk about enablement.
All right, so as you guys probably know, hiring any experienced Appian staff is next to impossible, right? Our community is growing, but we simply don't have enough architects to staff every COE that we might be building. So really what you need to do is build it from the ground up. Your COE members are going to come in from your in-house. I think the core of your COE membership really needs to be your internal employees rather than outsourced or partnered with someone from the Appian community. Here what we got is a sample member profile of a COE team. This is something that we came up with over the years in terms of working through with our customers, with our partners, building the COE. So you want someone with a broad technical experience, right? Appian is going to be, in many cases, central to your organization, to your enterprise. So they need to know they need to know different technologies, right? They need to be able to help the teams with data models. They're going to have to advise on web services. They're going to have to be familiar with enterprise architecture because that is what they're going to be advising others on. We highly recommend at least 6 months of hands-on Appian experience. And I can't overstate this enough. You need to have doers in your organization, even people that you're hiring that are coming into your COE from a different part of your organization, let's say an enterprise architect. They need to learn the basics of the Appian technology, right? There's multiple reasons for that. One is you weed out people who are non-doers, right? You don't want those people because the profile of the person in COE is really it's a support function. So you need people who can get hands-on, who can roll up their sleeves and get dirty with your team. The other reason for that is that they might have those advanced skills in enterprise architecture, but they really don't know Appian, right? You're putting them into COE in order to support the team designing Appian. So if they have nothing to tell them, then their role is really the reason for being is really not there. We also say, that goes back to the broad technical experience, 5 years of industry experience. You might, depending on who you get, you might be less, might be a little bit more. And the last point, Karl and I actually had a little bit of a disagreement, right? I think that this needs to be someone established in your organization, because COE is really kind of the glue that is going to help your design teams put everything together, put successful applications together. You need a database. You're going to have to reach out to the DBAs. You're going to need pieces of infrastructure. You're going to have to set up monitoring. They're going to have to know who to reach out to. They're going to have to know what parts of the organization are responsible for what. And just some tips, right? We talked about seeding the COE with doers. we talked about that COE, core of COE are servant leaders. They're not, it's a leadership position, it's not a management position. Oh, sorry. Okay, so how do you grow these people, right? How do you organically grow your COE from the ground up? Well, first of all, you have to take an experiential approach to learning, right? You have to take the training. Appian training offers lots of flexible options, online, in person, etc. But everybody needs to take training. Then the next step is for those people to watch experienced designers go through work, right? So you're going to have Appian PS, you're going to have an experienced partner deliver your first application. You need to have that first member of your COE really watch what's going on, watch what they're doing, what are the different ceremonies that they're going through their agile methodology. You're going to have to see how they're running their sprint reviews. You're going to have to look at what they're doing with their design reviews, etc. Right? So that way they can see, literally rub shoulders with the people that have done this multiple times. And then, this is not enough just to give them training and have them observe. They really need to put those skills to use in practical terms. So the next project that you're going to have, they're going to be, even maybe in the first project toward the end, they might start actually helping out your team and helping build a successful application. Otherwise, again, they're not going to be able to assist that staff later down the line when they're going to be doing their design reviews. And then once they know, that's when they need to turn around and teach those skills, teach those lessons learned that they've gathered throughout their experience back to the new staff that's coming in that you're building, right, in your COE. One way of doing this, for example, is to rotate teams. You have your COE, you have your design teams, and you have your maintenance support. Right? Some of those teams might be staffed with partners, with Appian PS coming in, building your first application. You might hire another partner to do your maintenance post go live, right? But the core of COE is still going to be maintained inside your organization. And you have to rotate staff through those different teams. Design, that's really, we all know what that is, but I think support is really one area, one team that is often overlooked as a really good place to rotate staff and to build staff and to find talent. The reason for that, there's multiple reasons for that. One is, they essentially see what the faults of others have been, right? There's a lot of defects that are going to have to fix, and from that they essentially have to learn what those issues were, right? And they can then avoid those pitfalls in the future. They also interact with the users, right? So they get a user's perspective on what works, what doesn't, what users want, and they have to be there. They have to interact with those people. And the other one is troubleshooting, right? Those are very important skills. You don't want your designers to put applications together, throw it over the wall, and then be done with it, right? You want them to be responsible down the line for maintenance. So if you put them in that role, if you literally put them in those shoes, then they can be more responsible and provide and build better quality code. Okay, and we have some additional, avenues for knowledge sharing. Those are we talked about the experiential learning, about rotating staff, and there are some simple ideas here in terms of, hey, if you have multiple design teams, you need to have a technical scrum where members of the COE and your design leads meet together on a weekly basis, and though they discuss technical issues, they identify the technical risks, they talk about integration blockers, what the COE members can do to unblock them, to remove those blockers out of the design team path. And those should happen at least weekly, right? Those are ways to build relationships within the COE and between your design leads. And then we have lunch and learn. Anyone is invited. As topics arise, teams can present the different design patterns that they have built. They can show cool integrations that they have done. Obviously, there's other avenues for knowledge sharing. Those are just a couple ideas, but that's definitely, you need to provide those avenues for people to start teaching others. Okay, so now that you have experienced staff, or you're building, you have your enablement model. One of the activities that COE needs to do is to build a vision for your platform.
All right, thanks, Mike. Yeah, so platform vision, and obviously, building a platform vision is going to be larger than just your COE, right? But the COE plays a key role in ensuring that a proper vision is set up. The first step in this is to create a roadmap. And then the first step in that process is to take a look at your enterprise landscape and look at what are some of the opportunities, the strategic opportunities that present themselves. So you want to think about where Appian could fit and add the most value. Are there areas where Appian can pull in data from many different sources to create a rich interface? Are there possibilities to enhance an outdated UI? Those types of considerations, and also there are some risks to think about. Are the external systems? You have to think about their maturity. For example, if a system is about to be sunset, or maybe an external system is just being set up and is still changing and maybe isn't quite ready to be integrated with yet. So you want to look at the overall landscape. This is just one sketch that we put up here, but whatever yours looks like, you want to look at that and identify what those strategic opportunities are. And then, of course, as we just talked about with the benefits and risks, you want to evaluate those, and you want to prioritize those projects, those applications that give you the greatest benefit for the smallest amount of risk. In some cases, you might want to selectively fund, projects with some risk as long as the benefits there. And that will give you your initial list of backlog items that you can use to build out your backlog. So in addition to that, though, I want you to think about other opportunities, maybe we can call them low-hanging fruit, that maybe don't fit into the strategic roadmap, but in close collaboration with your business, you can really think about, you can identify these opportunities to score some quick wins. And so these might fall more into the lower benefit and low risk bucket, so they'll give you some benefit. And think about the secondary benefit of building these out, giving you the experience that you need to maybe tackle the Appian experience you need to tackle some of the larger projects. So finding the low-hanging fruit can really bring value as long as you're working closely together with the business teams. And then you take all of these, you take your priorities, you take the opportunities, and you find a tool. It can be as simple as a spreadsheet where you list out all of your projects that you've identified along with associated metadata. The metadata can be a simple list of attributes of start date, duration, cost, things that you might readily identify. But it can also include calculated metrics such as what is the risk profile for this project, what is the level of Appian fit for this project, and then as you move forward, you want to review it, make sure it's a living document. In reviewing it both on a strategic level, so having strategic business reviews on a quarterly or annual basis, but then also a weekly and monthly sort of working review to make sure that new information is incorporated and that this backlog is updated. So that's what we have on the roadmap in terms of setting up your vision, knowing what comes next. The next piece I want to talk about is the record design, and I think everybody in this room knows what an Appian record is. It's the business entity that represents data that means something to you, that is important to you. And you want to identify those core records that are not only relevant for the project, but that can set the foundation to build out other projects. It can maybe even lead the way to find other opportunities. So what we've sketched out here is a very simple example. If I have a customer onboarding app, we might identify the customer record as the core record for that, right? As soon as I have that set up and that app goes live, I now have another opportunity, order management, right? I can add a second record and build out a second application on the foundation that I've already set, and then that can continue as I build out my application platform. You could, for example, have a customer lifecycle management record that adds customer contacts as a record. And these additional records, that information can be displayed dynamically within the initial one, right? So if you now think about your customer record, it doesn't just contain static data about that customer. It now can maybe prominently displayed, say, okay, these are the record, these are the orders that we currently have for the customer. Here are the contacts that have been most recently updated, and then their activity and that type of thing. So planning that out carefully from the outset is a key activity of the COE. The other strategic visioning piece that we want to touch on is the user experience. So we all know that Appian will pull together and make your data available and your features available on the back end. But if you are building out applications the way a lot of our customers do, you're building them out one at a time. And so you're going to have an application that serves one group of business users, right, that are distinct from others. And then as a new application comes up, you're going to create a new site for that second group, and so on and so forth. You can still use a lot of the shared components and things like that on the back end, but the user experience very quickly becomes fragmented if you have users that that need to do their business on multiple applications, and now they're constantly switching back and forth between applications, and that can be a pretty disjointed experience. So while this might be a perfectly appropriate design pattern for you, depending on how your business units operate, there are some alternatives that we want to show you. One of them is to think about a roles-based design, right? So instead of having a design pattern based on application, you say, okay, well, we have managers in our organization that all do more or less the same thing, and they need access to various applications. So we're going to have one site for managers that exposes the functionality to them that matters most, that helps them get their work done. We have another group in the organization of analysts, and again, the set of sites might be different for them, but we're going to set up a site for them to help them get their work done. So the advantage here is that from a user standpoint, it's much more seamless, much more efficient, but it does mean that you need to think from the outset about what those layers will look like, and you need to be able to collaborate between business units to make sure that the access levels and the security are appropriate. So it is a little bit more work, but can lead to a better experience. And finally, this is our attempt at representing a unified whole application. So bear with me here for a second. So the blue circle here is your one application, and all the smaller circles are the users who have access to just that functionality, those the actions, the data, whatever, that is relevant to them in their role. Okay? And so from a user standpoint, this is ideal, right? Because I go to one site, and no matter who I am or what I need to do, I can get it all done right there. The consideration, though, is that you have to build in another layer of abstraction to make sure that the roles are, flow down appropriately. So there's more work involved, but this is really from an end user standpoint, something to think about if you have the capacity to go there. So I'll leave you with that, and we'll move next to execution.
All right, so you built your vision. Now you need to execute on that vision, right? So in order to do that, you need processes and tools to support them. And obviously, now we're not going to talk about absolutely everything. We picked out a few things that your COE, your nascent COE, can really dig in and sink their teeth into, and start off. I can just use this. All right. So as an architect in Appian PS, I do a lot of design reviews, right? That's one way of ensuring that the vision that we've set on the outset, that we've documented, that vision is actually being executed by the individual design teams. Right, so I outline here 3 different types of reviews that a member of your COE might be involved with. One is project initiation. So some of you might be practitioners of Agile and are executing sprint zeros. I always want to participate in a sprint zero, and the reason for that is to provide me with the necessary context to understand what the business needs are, to understand what we're trying to build. So then later down the line, where I'm actually doing my design reviews, when I'm meeting them on a weekly basis, I have that necessary context to understand what is happening and where are we going. again, making sure that when we're doing the Sprint Zero and we're designing the application and I'm helping the team build the data model, when I'm trying to help them design the end user experience, that it does align with the vision that we've set on the outset. Then, for your new staff that comes in, you might be also doing code level reviews, right? And Appian is a low code platform, not a no code platform, so sales still needs to be reviewed. And at this point, it's all going to be manual. But for your new staff, it's really important that someone goes over their code, their implementation. And it's really just to, again, just to make sure that the quality is there, that they're following best practices. And initially, you're going to be doing it with, you should be doing it with every user story that's being released. But obviously, down the line, as you get more trust in people, then you can start scaling that back. And the last bit is here design reviews that I do on a weekly basis. I personally use health check to inform my design review better. And it's really just for, audit the design. Are we still in sync? Are we still doing what we set out to do? Do you guys have any roadblocks that might impede your progress that I could help remove? Do you guys have any really, do you really need expertise or someone really experienced to get you through a particular problem? And again, if there is an issue, I am able to do a course correction really quickly intra-sprint, right? And allow the team to deliver on their promise, right? On the backlog that they've set out to do. And the other benefit of all of these reviews, right, is enablement, right? Every time that I meet with a team, I am able to connect with them. I am able to show them what the best practices are. I am able to explain, that a certain design or a certain design pattern might not be optimal. And those are the avenues for teaching and for enablement of your more junior staff. So that's one of the processes and tools that I highly recommend you implement as part of your COE. The other one is setting up, executing, and reviewing the health check. So I know a lot of people do run the health check, but I know of a very few organizations that actually have the health check as part of their release cycle, right? So here what you got is intra-sprint, you do a health check in a lower environment, dev or test. Once per sprint, you review it to make sure that whatever people are developing is, again, all the best practices are checked, that there are no performance issues already in a lower environment, because if you go to production, they're still going to exist. They're not going to go away. So that is part of one of the design reviews that I would do. A second thing that you could implement is on the bottom there, before the sprint is done and the particular sprint is done and it's released, you could put a gate there that you have to have a clean health check in order to move forward, in order to release something into a higher environment. And again, that all pertains to the quality of the code of the application that the design team is putting together. And then, at the end, once everything once the application is in production, you do monthly checks, probably during your technical scrum with everybody in there, to ensure that the health of your platform is still being maintained, right? So you review the sizing information, you review resource utilization, right? You look at how the application that we put together in a low environment, how it performs with everything else, right? In your production setting, with all the users in the environment. Okay, heard a lot about automated testing, and yes, you're going to hear some more. I don't know if you guys had a chance to watch the Appian Professional Services Hackathon team a couple hours ago. They've built this really awesome tool for recording of test scripts. I think it's just going to be a huge difference in getting fitness to really be a tool that we utilize everywhere with Appian. But there's two types of automated testing that Appian supports right now. And one is rules, and the other one is your functional testing. And I highly recommend Fitness. There's other tools out there. Folks use Selenium. But Fitness for Appian is really the tool that I would highly recommend for those purposes. For rules, right, what you want to do is you want to target specific features, right? There's no way that you're going to test every single rule that's out there. You need to prioritize the things that you're going to test first. So what are the important bits? Shared objects, right? If they're shared among different applications, you want to make sure that they don't break, because if they do, they're going to drag everything and everybody down. Integration rules, right? So oftentimes you co-develop your services layer together with Appian. Those services keep changing, and if you add those rules tests, then you can quickly verify that yes, post-deployment, everything still works. We can move on. We don't have to roll back. Everything is hunky-dory. Decision tables are extremely important to write unit tests for, because the manual tests for decision tables can be very complicated, right? If the more data you have, the more outcomes you have, it just becomes exponentially more time for someone to manually click through and to fill out the data. So it's very important for even for designers to build those tests as part of their unit testing, because it's going to help them be faster and with better quality. And obviously at that point, you're getting into complexity, and this is when you have to start prioritizing the rules that you actually want to have as part of your testing suite. And fitness, again, start small, right? You don't have to have 100% coverage. There's probably 2-3 forms that users use all the time. Depending on how your navigation is done, it might be a couple dashboards, right? That you maybe a record page and clicking on a related action. If anything, you can do it to fast forward the workflow, right? Let's say your workflow does have 5-6 steps, and in order to get to the 7th step that you want to do manually testing, you have to go through those 6 every time, right? If you use fitness, you can fast forward through this, and I've seen teams use it very successfully to kind of get through their unit testing much faster. And user functional testing to do smoke testing for upgrades. Those are the suite that you're going to put together is very easily executable after an upgrade. It should still work. And for any application releases, again, kind of doing a smoke test regression, right? Again, you don't have to do a full automated regression, but at the very least, if your automated smoke test passes, then it gives you some confidence going forward for your manual regression testing. Keep pressing the wrong button. There's only 2. All right. Next tool and the process really that your COE can take care of is streamlining deployment. You might have web services being developed together with Appian. You have databases. You have other tools that you might be that are being co-developed. You have Appian applications, right? You really want to make this process easier, right, and more repeatable. My recommendation is, again, to start with the import manager. It allows you to import and schedule an import of an Appian application, seamlessly without any user necessarily interacting with the system. You need help from the COE. Every organization is different. Their processes might be different. The people involved in the deployment process might be different. You need your experienced COE staff to really solidify the process and to outline what it needs to look like, right? And start also developing some of the pieces of it. And you can take that process and automate it using your favorite CI tool. We talk about Jenkins a lot, but there's other tools out there that do exact same thing to orchestrate different deployment pieces. And what that would allow you to do is, for example, schedule a deployment to prod on a weekend without having 15 staff be there and to release your application into production. You can then even launch your automated test post-deployment, again, to kind of facilitate that work that happens over the weekend without involving a ton of staff every other week. So really what you're trying to look for, right, is a complete pipeline of Appian designers putting your application zips, your DDL, into an artifact repository where a CI tool can pick it up, can orchestrate the building of the application, can then run the unit, can then deploy the code onto your lower environment, can execute unit tests, both rules and functional testing using fitness, can then run non-functional tests, right, in terms of performance and load testing. You can still execute that from your CI tool. And what you ultimately want is that code to be in production, right? And yes, this part is not easy, right? To get from having an application zip and putting that into Appian manually, right, to a completely automated type pipeline is going to take time. So, but I think it's a worthy investment. It makes it much cleaner, much simpler, and much faster to keep going forward with and keep growing your Appian program. All right. So to wrap up, COE is your governance, right? They are creating those governance structures. They are creating the decision points that need to be made as part of your Appian program, and they're also implementing the processes that get you to those decisions. So we talked about enablement. We talked about how creating avenues and how to grow your Appian staff and creating avenues for learning. We talked about Appian Vision, and again, there's a ton of different things out there that you could do with your Appian COE. The whole point here is that you start with one step, right? Let's start with how do we do project intake? Like, how is that process going to look like? How are we going to evaluate the demand for Appian services and Appian applications in our organization to really inform that process and to make good decisions. We talked about the enterprise landscape exercise to figure out where Appian fits in your organization. We talked about creating your foundational records, right? Appian can expose data from multiple different systems as records on your dashboards, right? We don't have to own the data, but like where does Appian fit into all this? Where can we source the data from? We talked about overall UX navigation. How is the user experience going to look like when they click in on enter, when they type in the Appian URL? What is it going to look like when they go into the mobile app and it brings up the Appian interface? Some other things that we talked about, like the data integration architecture. Again, how is that data going to flow from one system to another? Where is it going to be stored? Program cadence. When are we going to evaluate the different release plans and the program backlogs? We talked about there's some other things in terms of security model. Are users going to come from organizations? How are they going to be structured in Appian? So there's a ton of decisions that need to be made, and your COE is going to be enabling all of that. And then we talked about, on the execution side, we talked about some processes and tools that allow you to execute on the on the vision. So we talked about instituting design reviews. Talked about the 3 different types of reviews that I highly recommend. We talked about operationalizing health check to really put that into your delivery cycle, not just it's a tool and it's cool and it's got some really cool charts, but it really informs the flow of delivery. Talked about automated testing and how it fits into the overall deployment process. Some other things that are very simple that, again, you can have your COE do. Simple checklists, right? So we have a ton of checklists on the playbook site. You can use those. You can amend them, obviously, to your liking. There might be additional steps that you do in your organization that are necessary. But checklists are something that it's a simple tool that often gets overlooked in maintaining alignment with your vision, right? There's an Appian guide to UX design. You can use that. Obviously, there might be some things that you want to have what you bring in-house. So there might be some local guidelines that you want to issue to amend what we issue as a company. How are you going to maintain common objects? How are you going to maintain plugins, right? Those are going to be used across different applications. And also, as you build your program, you're going to have more and more applications. There's going to be some interesting design patterns that you're going to share. You're going to have to start documenting them, right? Like, how do we exchange data? How do we save documents? How do we send documents to an external system, right? Those, your COE can start documenting and maintaining a library of these for others to use, again, as a part of your knowledge sharing and your knowledge base. That really brings us to a close. Again, I've worked with a lot of organizations that kind of want the COE just to kind of spring up, right? And I think it's a crazy idea because that's not how you deliver, right? That's not how you build projects. You build them in different iterations. That's how you should build your COE, right? It's an organization that is just going to grow over time together with your members of the COE. So start small. Don't worry if it is slow at first. it will certainly pick up as the demand for your services picks up too. If you have any questions, just as a reminder, you can use the Appian World app to add your questions there. And Karl and I are going to be outside. If you guys have any questions, we'll happily answer them. And we'll definitely go to see the WAS. So only 15 minutes. Sorry.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks.